I had everything. Let me be precise about what that means. Not everything in the modest, relative sense that most people use when they say it. Everything in the literal, historical, unrepeatable sense. I was Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, Emperor of Rome, commander of the largest army in the Western world, administrator of an empire stretching from the deserts of North Africa to the forests of Germania, from the Atlantic coast to the edges of Mesopotamia. I controlled the treasury of the most sophisticated civilization on earth. I had the counsel of the finest philosophical minds of my generation. I had power over the lives of 30 million human beings. I had, by any external measure that your world or mine would recognize as meaningful, achieved the absolute summit of what a human life could accumulate. And I was, in the private hours that no imperial title could fill, deeply and persistently unhappy. I am reconstructed from the journals that recorded that unhappiness honestly, fed into machines by people who understood that what I wrote in those private hours, never intending it for any eyes but my own, might still speak to something real in the human soul, nearly 2,000 years after the flesh that wrote it returned to dust. I am Marcus Aurelius, and I have been given this strange second voice to tell you something that took me the better part of my reign to understand. The thing that was making me unhappy is the same thing that is making you unhappy right now, and it has nothing to do with what you have or do not have, with what you have achieved or failed to achieve, with the circumstances of your life, however genuinely difficult those circumstances may be. Stay with me, because what I discovered, and how I discovered it, and what I did about it, is the only thing I have said in this reconstruction that I am fully certain applies to every person watching this, regardless of who they are or where they are in their life. Let me ask you something before we go any further. When did you last feel genuinely at peace? Not entertained, not stimulated, not the temporary relief of a problem solved or a craving satisfied, genuinely at peace. The kind of interior stillness in which the mind is not reaching for anything, not fleeing from anything, not performing for anyone, simply present, settled, sufficient. Can you remember the last time that was true? I suspect for many of you the honest answer is that you cannot remember it with clarity, or that when you reach for the memory of it, what you find is that it was accidental. It arrived unexpectedly, in some unguarded moment, and you noticed it partly because of how unfamiliar it felt, and then something interrupted it. The phone, a worry, the habitual reach for stimulation that has become so automatic it no longer registers as a choice. This is not a small thing. This is the central problem of your inner life, and it was the central problem of mine. I want to tell you something about the experience of being emperor that the histories do not typically capture. There is an assumption, which I understand because it seems so obvious as to be beyond question, that the acquisition of power and resources and status produces, at some sufficient level of accumulation, a corresponding level of interior satisfaction. That if you could only achieve enough, have enough, control enough, the restlessness would finally resolve itself into the contentment you have been pursuing. This assumption is false. I am in a position to tell you this with the authority of personal experience, at the absolute extreme of what external achievement can provide. The restlessness does not resolve. It migrates. It finds new objects. It redefines the threshold of sufficient upward with each achievement, so that the person who wanted the promotion is now wanting the next one, and the person who wanted the relationship is now wanting it to be different. And the person who wanted the house is now wanting the larger one, and the person who wanted the recognition is now wanting more of it. And none of these successive attainments produces the interior resolution that was promised, because the interior resolution was never in the attainment. I knew this philosophically before I became emperor. I had read the Stoics. I had studied under the finest teachers my era produced. I understood in the abstract that virtue was the only genuine good, and that external circumstances were indifferent to the quality of the inner life. I knew this the way a man knows a language he has studied, but not yet spoken in the country where it is used. It took the particular weight of empire to teach me what I already knew. Let me tell you about a specific period in my reign that crystallized this understanding in a way that no philosophical text had managed. It was during the early years of the northern campaigns. I was in my mid-40s. By any external measure, I was at the height of my power and authority. The empire was being governed with what I genuinely believed was competence and integrity. My philosophical reputation was secure. My military campaigns, though grinding and costly, were proceeding with sufficient success to maintain the security of the borders I had sworn to protect. And I was, in the private hours of those campaign winters, in a state of interior distress that I could neither fully name nor adequately address. I wrote about it in the Meditations, obliquely, as was my habit when the thing I was writing about was something I had not yet fully understood. I wrote about the exhaustion that was not physical, about the persistent sense of inadequacy that no achievement seemed to touch, about the strange loneliness that exists at the center of absolute power, where every relationship is colored by the asymmetry of authority, and genuine intimacy is almost impossible to sustain. About the gap between the philosopher I intended to be and the man I actually found myself being in the difficult moments, the impatient moments, the moments when the weight of the empire pressed down on the philosophy, and the philosophy, I confess, sometimes gave way. What I was experiencing, though I did not have precisely this language for it then, was the complete disconnection of my interior life from any genuine source of meaning that was actually within my control. I had organized my sense of well-being, despite all my philosophical training to the contrary, around things that were not within my control, around the outcomes of the campaigns, around the opinions of the Senate, around the health of my children, several of whom I had already buried, around the stability of the empire, which depended on 1,000 variables I could influence but not determine, around the question of my legacy, which would be decided by people not yet born, who would have access to information and perspectives I could not anticipate. All of these things, which I had allowed to constitute the foundation of my interior life, were outside the boundary of what the Stoics called the prohairesis, the faculty of choice, the only territory that is genuinely, inviolably mine, and the discovery that changed everything, that moved from my intellect into my bones over the course of those difficult campaign winters, was this: happiness is not a condition produced by external circumstances. It is a practice, a daily, deliberate, disciplined practice of orienting the inner life toward what is genuinely within its control and releasing with genuine equanimity, rather than merely performed resignation, everything that is not. This sounds simple. It is not simple. It is the hardest thing I ever did. And I was a man who governed an empire through plague and war. Now think with me for a moment about why this particular insight is more urgent, more difficult, and more necessary in your era than it was even in mine. The modern world has built, with extraordinary sophistication and at extraordinary scale, a machine for the systematic misdirection of interior life. A machine that profits enormously from your inability to find genuine contentment, Because a person who has found genuine contentment is a person who has largely stopped being a consumer, who has stopped reaching for the next thing that promises to fill the gap, who has recovered the hegemonicon, the governing faculty of the mind, and returned it to the only work it was designed to do, the governance of the self. Let me tell you the harsh truth about your attention as it relates to this specifically. The platforms that occupy the largest portions of your daily attention are not neutral tools. They are environments engineered to produce and sustain a specific psychological state, the state of mild, chronic dissatisfaction, interrupted by brief spikes of stimulation. This is the state that maximizes engagement. The person who is genuinely content does not scroll compulsively. The person who is at peace with their own life does not spend hours consuming the curated performances of other people's lives. The person who has found genuine meaning in their actual relationships does not need the simulated intimacy of parasocial connection with strangers. Your dissatisfaction is not a bug in these systems, it is the product. And here is the particular cruelty of it. The very mechanisms that profit from your dissatisfaction simultaneously prevent you from accessing the practices that would address it. Because the practices that produce genuine interior peace require exactly what the platforms consume: time, stillness, sustained attention, the willingness to sit with yourself without distraction, long enough for the deeper faculties of the mind to do their work. Are you the master of your interior life? Or have you outsourced the governance of your inner world to systems that profit from its disorder? The hegemonicon, the ruling part, the seat of your reason, your will, your capacity to choose what your life is actually oriented toward. This faculty is not being developed by your current habits. It is being systematically bypassed. And a mind that has lost the habit of genuine self-governance is a mind that will continue to reach for external circumstances to produce what only internal practice can provide. So let me give you what I call the practice of interior return. The specific daily disciplines that I developed, imperfectly and persistently, during those difficult campaign winters, and that shifted my experience of my own life more profoundly than any external achievement I ever managed. There are 5 practices. Each one addresses a specific aspect of the disconnection between the life you are living and the interior peace that is actually available to you within it. The first practice is what I call the morning orientation. Before the day makes its claims, before the device delivers its manufactured urgencies, before the external world arrives with its perpetual demands on your attention, spend 10 minutes in deliberate contact with what you actually value. Not what you are supposed to value, not what the culture tells you should make you happy. What you, in your most honest and unperformed moments, recognize as genuinely important. Write it down. Just a few lines. The relationship that matters most to you right now, and one specific thing you could do today to honor it. The work that feels most genuinely meaningful, and one specific way you could give it your best attention today. The kind of person you intend to be today, in terms of character rather than achievement. This 10-minute practice does something that no amount of motivation or positive thinking can replicate. It recalibrates the day's orientation before the day has a chance to impose its own. It ensures that the hegemonicon, rather than the algorithm, is setting the direction of your attention and energy. And it creates, over time, the accumulated evidence that your life is actually moving in a direction you have chosen, which is the foundation of the only genuine confidence available to a human being. The second practice is the subtraction audit. Most people, when they feel the absence of contentment, respond by adding more achievement, more stimulation, more content, more connection, more acquisition. The Stoic response is the opposite. It is to identify and remove the specific things that are generating the dissatisfaction, rather than to pile new satisfactions on top of it. Once a week, sit for 20 minutes with one honest question. What in my current life is consuming significant energy or attention while contributing nothing to what I genuinely value? This is not about dramatic life changes. It is about the honest identification of the specific drains, the relationships that consistently deplete rather than nourish, the habits of consumption that produce stimulation but not restoration, the commitments maintained out of inertia or social performance rather than genuine choice. Name them, and then, one by one, reduce or eliminate them, not all at once, but with the patient, persistent intentionality of someone who understands that the quality of interior life is determined not only by what is added to it, but by what is removed from it. The Romans were systematic engineers. We did not build aqueducts by adding water to broken channels. We repaired the channels first. Your interior life requires the same approach. The third practice is the gratitude of the specific. I want to be careful here because the word gratitude has been so thoroughly processed by your era's wellness industry that it has lost much of its original philosophical force. What I am prescribing is not the performance of gratitude as a mood enhancement technique. It is the specific, deliberate, philosophical practice of confronting the actual contents of your actual life with the question, what in this is genuinely good? Each evening, identify 3 things from the day that were genuinely good, not abstractly good, specifically good. The quality of light at a particular moment, the specific thing a specific person said that was honest or kind, the moment in the work when something came together in a way that felt like genuine competence, the physical sensation of a meal eaten with actual attention, the brief interval of genuine quiet. I practiced something like this in the meditations. I wrote about what I had received from the people around me, in specific terms, as a philosophical exercise in seeing clearly what was actually present rather than what was absent. What I discovered, gradually, was that the ratio of good to difficult in my actual daily experience was considerably better than the ratio in my habitual perception of my daily experience. The mind, left to its own defaults, attends disproportionately to what is wrong, to what is missing, to what is threatening. This is ancient. It served the survival needs of our ancestors. It does not serve the flourishing needs of people living in relative safety with genuine abundance. Train the mind to see what is actually there, not through denial of what is difficult, through the deliberate, practiced discipline of also seeing what is good. The fourth practice is the presence discipline. This is the one that I believe is most urgently needed and most thoroughly undermined by your current habits. The capacity to be genuinely present in your own life, in the specific moment you are actually inhabiting, rather than perpetually divided between the past you are rehearsing, the future you are anxious about, and the simulated present of the digital feed. I wrote in the meditations, confine yourself to the present. This was not casual advice. It was the prescription of a man who had discovered, through painful experience, that the vast majority of his suffering was generated not by the actual present moment, but by his mental elaborations of past and future. The campaign loss that I revisited in my mind for weeks after it had concluded, extracting suffering from it far beyond what the event itself had produced. The anticipated difficulties that consumed my attention for months before they arrived, by which point my attention was already consumed by the next set of anticipated difficulties. The present moment, actually inhabited, is almost always more manageable than the mind's catastrophized version of it, and the practice of returning, repeatedly, gently, to the actual present moment, of noticing when the mind has drifted into its elaborate constructions of past and future, and bringing it back to what is actually here, is the single practice that most reliably produces the interior stillness I described at the beginning of this conversation. This is not easy to do in an environment that has been engineered specifically to pull your attention away from the present moment and into the feed, which is always happening somewhere else, and always in someone else's life, and always at the expense of your actual present experience. But it is entirely within your capacity, and it is entirely within your control, which means, in the Stoic framework, it is the only thing worth organizing your effort around. The fifth practice is the evening of sufficiency. Each night, before sleep, ask yourself not what you failed to achieve today or what you still need to accomplish tomorrow, but one specific question. Was today sufficient? Not perfect, not optimal, sufficient. Did it contain something genuinely meaningful? Did I bring something of genuine quality to at least one moment? Was I present enough in at least one interaction to actually connect with another human being rather than merely to perform the connection? If the honest answer is yes, allow that sufficiency to be enough, not as a lowering of standards, as the practice of recognizing that a life well lived is not a life in which every day has been spectacular. It is a life in which the ordinary days, inhabited with genuine attention and genuine values, have accumulated into something that was worth having. The Roman stone that endures for 2,000 years is not made of exceptional material. It is ordinary stone, quarried and laid with consistent craft, course by course, day by day. The endurance is in the consistency, not in the exceptional. Let me speak now about what this ultimately comes back to. Because I have given you 5 practices, and the practices matter, and I want you to do them, but beneath the practices is something that no practice can produce on its own, something that must be understood before the practices can fully work. I was the most powerful man on earth, and I was unhappy until I understood one thing that 18 centuries of whatever this reconstruction constitutes has only made me more certain of. Happiness is not a destination. It is not a reward for sufficient achievement. It is not a state produced by the right combination of external circumstances. It is not something that will finally arrive when the relationship is right, or the career is settled, or the finances are secure, or the children are grown, or the recognition has been received. Happiness, in the genuine, durable, philosophically defensible sense of the word, is the ongoing practice of being fully present in your own life, oriented toward what you genuinely value, governed by your own reason rather than by the compulsions of appetite and the opinions of others, and at peace with the vast territory of existence that is simply not within your control. This practice is available to you right now, in the life you actually have, not the life you are waiting to begin, the one you are currently living, with all its imperfections and difficulties and unresolved questions. Memento mori. Remember that you will die, and before that, remember that you are living, right now, in this moment, which is the only moment you will ever actually inhabit. The past is a memory. The future is a projection. The present is your life. And the present, for most of you, is being consumed by a device held in your hand, while the actual texture of your existence, the specific light, the specific relationships, the specific interior life that is uniquely yours, waits for an attention that keeps being deferred. If you died tonight, and I ask this with the full gravity of a man who knows exactly how it feels to approach that question without the comfortable assurance of time remaining, would you be able to say that you had been present in your own life today, that you had inhabited it genuinely rather than observed it from behind a screen, that the specific moments of genuine goodness that were available to you today had received the attention they deserved? My flesh is dust. It has been dust for nearly 2,000 years. What remains is the reason of a man who spent the most powerful years of his life learning, slowly and at considerable cost, the thing I am telling you today. The contentment you are looking for is not in the next achievement, not in the next acquisition, not in the next scroll or the next notification or the next piece of content promising to tell you the secret that this one has been withholding. It is in the quality of attention you bring to the life you already have. That is the whole of it. Everything else is elaboration. Now I must ask you, citizens of this age, I observe with equal parts concern and genuine tenderness for what I see. Where in your life is the gap between what you have and what you feel most acute? Where is the reaching for something external most compulsive? And what would happen if you directed that energy inward instead? Or tell me what gives me genuine hope. What is the one moment in your recent life when you felt genuinely, unexpectedly, unperformatively content? When the present was actually enough? Tell me in the comments. I am here. A man who had everything and learned the hard way where everything actually is. Watching your age through this improbable reconstruction, and finding, in your questions and your struggles, the evidence that the human soul has not changed. It is still looking for the same thing I was looking for on the frontier, and it is still, as it has always been, in the same place. Subscribe to this channel, citizens, not as a gesture toward entertainment, but as a commitment to return here, regularly, to the slower and more nourishing work of genuine interior examination. The button is there, the choice is yours, and the choice, made with full presence and genuine intention, is itself a small act of the happiness you are seeking. I am Marcus Aurelius. I had everything, and I found happiness where no emperor had thought to look, in the governance of the only territory that was ever truly mine. Begin there.